Good evening, Mayor and councilors. As Robbie mentioned tonight, we have a presentation on an upcoming project that has been forming for many years. As Robbie noted, is a council priority to focus efforts into downtown revitalization, especially within the 10th Avenue corridor. But this is also an effort that has been identified by the community and by leadership going back to many other plans and policy discussions, which Justin will touch on later this evening as well. Tonight, Carla and Justin will present on two parts of an effort to engage with and really enhance and create a vision for the 10th Avenue corridor. As many of you know, 10th Avenue is a vibrant district within Hillsborough downtown and a key component of our community in many ways. It is many things: a neighborhood, a vibrant retail corridor, a state highway, a key transit corridor as well. And it comes with it many opportunities and in some cases challenges, both near term and long term. And we recognize those. And we also want to note that this is one of many efforts and levels of engagement and activity that are happening in downtown. We are engaging with partners like Washington County and others related to the homeless shelter that's going in on 10th Avenue. We also recognize that there are challenges right now that include crime and at times conflicting transportation modes that maybe do not contribute in a positive way to this corridor, things that we hope to engage in and evaluate. And then also impacts of homelessness. We've heard from the community there as well, concerns that has within this part of our community. But really tonight's presentation also seeks to identify near, mid, and long-term opportunities as well of how do we bring this to bear with those other conversations to hear from the community, to engage and receive information on vision for this corridor, things that can draw upon that economic vibrancy of so many small businesses in this corridor, that build upon the attractiveness of this place for our whole community, and especially the Latinx part of our community that really identifies with this area as a key hub for their community activities, commercial needs, and also housing as well. And then lastly, builds upon many public facilities that are in here that Justin will talk about more, especially things like Chute Park and the library, and also the Chute Park Aquatic Center as well. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carla to start off the formal part of the presentation.
All right. Thanks. Sorry, trying to unmute myself. Go ahead, Justin, if you don't mind advancing it to the next slide. So this is the area that we are talking about. In general, it goes from Main Street to just south of Chute Park, but it does also encompass the neighborhoods that surround 10th Avenue. So we want to engage those folks as well because they live and shop in that area. Go to the next one, Justin. And then this particular slide shows all of the different sub areas within downtown. So the blue is obviously the 10th Avenue corridor. We've got the Oak Baseline sub area, which encompasses Oak and Baseline from like Adams Street to 10th Avenue on both the couplet and then along 10th Avenue. And then you all know the Main Street sub area, which is about 10 blocks that's circled in red. And then the Pacific University Health and Professions campus. Go ahead, Justin. So here's a list of near-term beautification projects that we plan to do. There's 9 of them listed here. We've already started on some of them. So we have partnered with the Hillsborough Downtown Partnership, and they are working on trash cleanup as well as community cleanups along the Oak Baseline and 10th Avenue core area. 10th Avenue corridor, sorry. So they're already working on that. We do have a list of sidewalk repairs that we would like to do along the 10th Avenue corridor. There's some holes that have been left from trees that have been taken down. So we will fill those in probably in the spring of 2022. We've also identified landscaping improvements along the 10th Avenue corridor. We would like to pressure wash and clean all the sidewalks. Again, that will likely happen in the spring of 2022, just because of the rainy season and whatnot. We are looking at wayfinding and parking signs, and that will be determined. We have some solar trash cans. You've probably seen them throughout downtown. We have 2 of those that we are going to install along 10th Avenue, a couple by the TriMet stops. And we will work on pickup and disposal services. And then work on a parking strategy plan to let folks know where the parking is available. And then we've expanded our storefront and tenant improvement grants. So I've already done 2 along the 10th Avenue corridor. So El Chino restaurant and then the bakery that is inside Diamond Event Center. We helped out with type 1 hoods. So the storefront improvement program can offer up to a grant of $40,000, and that's a dollar for dollar match. And then the tenant improvement grant is one where the city partners with either the tenant or the property owner, and the city will fund 70% of that tenant improvement. And then I don't know if you've all seen the winter lighting program. We've lit 19 roof lines along 10th Avenue, which provides for a little bit more festive atmosphere and also lends itself to to sort of the security of the area. So we just want to brighten up the area and make it more festive. And so all of those proposed projects are to a total of about $774,000. One that isn't on there that we would like to do is provide a restroom that is like open 24/7. So something like the Portland Loo, which is very difficult to damage. And so we would like feedback from the community where they think that particular one might be a good place to place that one. Maybe it's Shoe Park, or maybe it's somewhere else that they find would be more amenable to them. So we're still working with the community to find out what that might be. Does anybody have any questions about these near-term beautification projects before we move on?
I just have one question, and it's about the taxes and the area that we would be using tax dollars from. Can you go back to that map and show us where those tax dollars come from?
Sorry, Councilor Alcara, you're talking about the Urban Renewal District, is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's whatever funds are going to be used to fund this project.
So there are a couple of different funding components. So we did receive federal money for actually the storefront and the tenant improvement projects. But the black line that is on this map is the urban renewal area. So any increment in taxes that happens over the life of this urban renewal area, we can use that for capital projects. So we can use that to rehab sidewalks, put in more lighting, repave streets. We can use it for all kinds of things, and also tenant and storefront improvement projects.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
I had a question. How has ODOT been involved in this? That was something I was curious about, since they
sure.
technically have jurisdiction over the roadway.
Yeah, so I am heading up a project that is the Oak Baseline Couplet, and it goes along 10th Avenue, so the Oregon 8 portion of that. So they have been involved in that project, and then we have already looped them in to the other area of 10th Avenue that is actually owned by Washington County, so from Main Street to Baseline. So they are aware of what we are doing here.
Carla, I have a comment more on the funding, if you don't mind going back to that slide for a second. So a number of these projects were generated just for the council's benefit as a result, not only of like previous work that we've identified, but some of the responses to the comments we heard from the county's meeting a couple of months back. Specifically things like cleanliness of the particular area. That was a theme that came up when the community expressed some of their concerns around the homelessness situation. So that's why you see projects like that showing up on here. They express things like security and lighting. That's why you see the lighting project on here. They express things like economic incentives or benefits. That's why you see the storefront and tenant improvement grants on here. So we didn't just come up with this list out of nowhere. We did respond to some of the comments that we heard. So I thought it was important to mention that as you see this list.
Thanks, Raheem. Yep. Any other questions? Okay, Justin, you can take it away.
Thanks, Carla. The next part of the presentation that I'll be sharing is related more to the longer term visioning for 10th Avenue and looking out a few years in terms of what the corridor can look like long term for the community. And let's see, get back into the slide. And as we start to look at a vision and to engage the community to develop a vision, we're starting with the objectives that have already been laid out through the guiding principles and the council priorities. And as we look at 10th Avenue, some of the priorities and principles that jump out right away are really the need to have an accessible community engagement and to focus the project through the equity lens, and to be very cognizant of the importance of the 10th Avenue, especially to our Latinx community. So also other priorities that jump out are economic development, making the corridor more vital economically as an important commercial part of the city, and also improving the environmental sustainability of the street. So with those high-level objectives, we also are seeking to build upon the excellent work that's already been done by the planning department and other departments in the city to build a foundation for the neighborhood. And as we go back and look at some of the plans that have been developed over the years, such as the Urban Renewal Plan, the Downtown Framework Plan, and more recently, the Hillsborough 2035 Community Plan, we see the same themes really are repeated and emphasized again and again through these documents. And that is to look at ways to calm traffic on 10th Avenue and to enhance the safety and experience for bikes and pedestrians. Another main goal that comes out of these documents that we see again and again in various locations throughout them is the focus on building upon and preserving the character that the neighborhood already has and preserving its sense of place. Translated specifically to 10th Avenue, preserving the Latinx culture in neighborhood, which is there. And then one of the other themes that came out of these plans was the need to be very collaborative as we look to implement projects in a community, and to convene both the property owners and the business operators so that we co-create with them ideas for how we can enhance the neighborhood and turn 10th Avenue into even more of a destination neighborhood within the city. And so with that foundation, internally we have ideas and some visions, that we can think of for what 10th Avenue might look like. And they're very exciting as we look around the nation for inspiration. And here's a few examples, from other cities that have had very successful efforts around particular neighborhoods, and some architectural examples too that come to mind for how we might embrace, the culture of 10th Avenue and build upon it and celebrate it. But the thing is with these, these are ideas and examples that kind of our city staff have had, and they're great, but, we really want to make sure that the ideas are coming from the community and it's collaborative. So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with any particular ideas, but these are some of the things that we're thinking of at a high level that we may be able to embrace along 10th Avenue. So as we get to looking at the upcoming community engagement, and once a little further into the presentation, I'll outline the steps coming up in the coming months for how we're hoping to engage the community. Really, the goal of all of that is to have an overarching community engagement process where, rather than approaching the neighbors ad hoc for one project and then a few months later for another project and a few months later for another, we really want to do it holistically so that we have a vision that encompasses the entire corridor, and which in turn can guide a number of projects, some of which are merely ideas at this point. They may never become projects, but they're ideas for projects. And then we have a few, like the Oregon 8 project that Carla referenced just a few minutes ago, which are already starting. The wheels are turning there, but it's going to take a little bit of time to work through the concepts and the plans for those projects. And so this is a very nice opportunity to engage with the community and have that input help to inform those projects going forward. And so some of the specific ideas or concept projects that we have in mind are the Oregon 8, which I'll share a few slides on that in just a second. Also, we're looking at the streetscape of 10th Avenue, looking at the neighborhood through the transportation lens. And as was mentioned, we're partners in the district with Washington County and ODOT when it comes to the roadway jurisdiction. But we're looking at some ideas on how we can improve the streetscape, and I'll share a few slides along those lines as well. And then another specific that we have in mind that we'd like community guidance on what they'd like to see long-term is what's the best use long-term for the Hillsborough Police Department site at the corner of 10th Avenue in Washington. And while maintaining a police presence, what could really be done with that block long-term to invigorate and celebrate the community even more. And then the two boxes on the right are dashed because at this point they're pretty loosely defined, but we want to make sure that as part of this conversation that we're not only talking about physical project ideas, but also thinking about the other means that we can use to reinvigorate 10th Avenue, whether that be investment types, direct investment or other types, community investment models where it's a cooperative ownership. Maybe it's incentivizing affordable commercial space. Lots of ideas there, but they're loosely defined at this point and purposely so that we can brainstorm and develop those ideas with the community as we work through this engagement process. Let me stop right there. That's quite a lot of information. And the next part of the presentation will step into some of the specific project ideas, those lower boxes in the preceding slides. But I'd like to pause for just a second there and invite any questions or feedback to this point.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions?
I don't have a question, Justin, but like last night and right now, you were speaking to me in a really good way. And all I can say is I wish I had Carlos Santana right now playing out loud so I could continue to get this vibe. Can you go back to the photos? Okay, I'm familiar with Ovetta Street and I spent a lot of time there. And this is what I have envisioned since I moved to Hillsborough in 2001. So I just want you to know that you have a lot more that you're going to tell us, but I want you to know that I really am appreciating the work that you've put into this along with your colleagues, but that this is what I'm feeling when you talk about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Alcare. It's our privilege, and like you, I think we share a lot of excitement about what 10th Avenue can be and how it can really be even more a main street, especially for the Latinx community, and can be celebrated and can really be an exciting destination. There's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, both internally within the city staff, and as we start to engage in the communication with the neighborhood, we're hearing it there too. So it's tremendously exciting to be a part of. All right, well, thank you for that. I'll continue to move ahead then if there's no other questions on the first part of the presentation. But as we look at that slide with the rectangle up top and the various squares beneath, the first one was related to the Oregon 8, the Oak Baseline 10th Avenue corridor study that Carla has been leading for some time in collaboration with ODOT in Washington County. And this project, its limits are a little bit different than what we've been focusing on 10th Avenue. As you can see there, it's really centered along Oak and Baseline, but it includes 10th Avenue from Baseline south to Maple. And so there's a lot of overlap there. And so everything that comes out of this work will really need to be integrated with the vision that we're developing for 10th Avenue. And what the work is to develop a concept plan for the area shown in this slide for development long-term. So we're not contemplating it at the moment as one-time capital city-led project, but as a plan that would guide development along this corridor over time. And some of the ideas that may come out of it are along the lines of what you see here. The final cross sections for the roadway are as yet to be determined. They'll be the outcome of the study, but they will in all likelihood be along these lines in terms of how to widen and improve the pedestrian facilities, how to make the bike corridor more appealing and safer, and how to improve the streetscape through enhanced landscaping as well. And this is looking at cross sections, but also looking at the safety of the intersection and pedestrian street crossings so that people on foot can get across Oak and Baseline more safely and more comfortably will be goals of that work. And so that's been moving along already. It's on its own timeline to some degree because of the cooperation with ODOT, Washington County, and also Metro. But that work is underway, and as we start to develop the vision for 10th Avenue, it will need to be massaged in and incorporated into that larger vision. The second element, specific element that we've been looking at when it comes to 10th Avenue vision and how that vision can shape the future is along the streetscape of 10th. And these really are just ideas at this point. They're tools in the toolbox. We want the concept design to come out of the community visioning, but some of the tools that we may be able to deploy on 10th are things like the next few slides will show. One would be improving the intersection and pedestrian safety by installing curb extensions and higher visibility striping and planters. Another would be creating public spaces, looking for opportunities to buy out real estate, to buy out space from what's really a vehicle-dominated corridor today, and look for ways to create urban spaces. That might be a plaza, or it might be areas associated with the restaurants where people can eat outside. It could be a lot of things, but we want to work with the community to find out really what they would like to see and look for opportunities to carve out that space to make it more of a gathering place rather than merely a highway. A few other tools are like moving the curb in this slide. That you might notice that the word curb is in quotation marks because it doesn't have to be physically moving the curb. It can be done more economically than that. It can be done with the intelligent use of planters and striping to take it back again space from the vehicle to the pedestrian and to the bicyclist, and to create a streetscape that's a place where you want to be, where there can be tables, there can be vendors, all sorts of things that create a sense of community on a person scale rather than being vehicle dominated as 10th Avenue is today. And the final slide reiterates one of the earlier ones in terms of just looking at improving intersections, improving safety, and how the pedestrian experience can be enhanced through curb extensions, better aligned ramps, higher visibility striping, things like these. But these are all just the tools. They're not really the vision. They're just the tools that we can use to work with the community to look at 10th Avenue and how it can be a neighborhood and not a highway only. And then the next box that we look at is the Hillsborough Police Department site. And this one is really, we're just looking at this as an opportunity, as being a large piece of city-owned property, very strategically located when it comes to the 10th Avenue corridor, right at the corner of Washington and 10th, very visible, right on the transit line. And so we'd like to hear from the community to be imaginative. You know, what is the long-term dream for this site that would really pull the community together because it's such a valuable piece of property there that we already are invested in. And so as we move into really the final part of the presentation, the next few slides look at the very next steps in this process. And the next steps are all dominated again by community engagement. And going back to the guiding principles and objectives of this project, we really want to make sure that we are embracing diversity, equity, inclusion, and reaching out in a way that's going to get participation from folks that have not always been able to participate, or in some cases, they haven't even been reached by our communication methods. So we want to do more with this and really make sure that we are engaging the entire neighborhood and getting a broad set of perspectives on it. And so some of the events that we have planned, and we're still working on finalizing the exact dates, but generally we're looking at the month of December. We have 3 workshops on the board, 2 to be held in Spanish, 1 in English. And these we're very excited about because they're led by James Rojas from Place It Interactive Planning. And he came up a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and did a demonstration for some city staff of what these workshops are like. And they're really great is what they are. I mean, he uses some methods to spark the creative part of the mind rather than the adult part of the mind. And he uses objects, art objects like games, and you can see there on in the slide, toys and other small objects. And the exercise begins with create a model of one of your favorite childhood memories. And it gets people to think about community and what's really important to them rather than the nuts and bolts of space planning and parking and asphalt and things like this, curbs. And over a series of exercises, he starts to transition that into transforming that vision into a place, into, in this case, a linear place, 10th Avenue. And so it's a very fun exercise, really engaging, especially for those that may not be accustomed to thinking about urban design. And so we're excited about those. We'll also have a walk that's scheduled to go out there with him and some other members of the design team and look at the neighborhood now and how it's being used and how the community has already shaped it to their needs. And of course, too, in light of COVID, and it's just part of standard practice as well, we'll have an online open house running as well to make sure that people can engage remotely. And then in early January, we will follow up on the walk with an online event where we can talk about that again with the community involved. And also in January, there's a series of pop-ups that we will be scheduling, and pop-ups are really just that. It's where James or another member of the design team will pop up where people are, rather than requiring them to come on our time frame to a place designated by us. It's going to look to engage folks in the grocery store, at the laundromat, at the school. And so we'll be working to set up the best times and locations for that. But we're hoping to really take it to the street and get everybody's input that we can out there in the community. And then the next step is going to be to take that visioning and go to the drawing board. And we have, as a member of the consultant team, Salazar Architect, we're working with them. And they will work in the early months of next year to transform that community vision, what the neighborhood wants, into some actual project ideas, plans that will show us how we can do it, and start to develop some actual project scopes that then can be prioritized, and we can talk about implementation. And then finally, the final part of this process, and this is the first part, of course, of the process. So the end of the beginning, I suppose we could say, would be another open house in February, where we feed back to the community how that vision has been transformed into a plan, receive one more round of feedback before we finalize that master plan. And then really we move into more of a design phase of the work based on which ideas are embraced and which ones are prioritized. And that, I think, is the last slide that I have to share. So thank you very much for letting me run through that presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Councilor Roletto, I see your hand.
Thank you so much for this. I want to echo what Council Alcare mentioned in regards to that vision. I too had already picked out a couple spots for the plaza as well that I could just envision, and just brought me back to childhood memories and knowing what an impact that has in a community, as well as the businesses around that area. So that was really exciting to see. In regards to your timeline for December, has that outreach started or like soon?
It needs to start. It
Okay.
really, it needs to have started already. It's a short time frame. And
Short.
it's heading right into the holidays too, which makes it harder for folks as well. I think one of the things that we're going to talk about with our team, the consultant team, is the possibility of stretching it out a little bit, so that maybe we have a couple of those workshops before the holidays, 1 or 2, and then maybe 1 or 2 afterward, and the whole schedule might get elongated
Right.
a little bit. Yeah, I that right now this is kind of still what's been penciled in, but I think we need to have that
Yeah.
conversation, because it's a really short time frame, and it's right in the heart of the holiday.
I mean, depending on which groups you're going to be reaching out to. I mean, unless patterns have changed a whole bunch since I taught in Hillsborough, there's also a good group of people that are gone for a good chunk of December, and holidays extend through January 6th as well. So a lot of people put priority there. But I was thinking about, I was at that meeting last night. I was thinking about the one neighbor who spoke up in regards to feedback from students or children. And so I'm hoping that's part of the reach out too, whether it be through schools or other organizations of the other part of our constituents who, are going to be playing, are going to be engaging in a different way. So, but yeah, I was just going to say, that is a short timeline. So I hope, and I would love to be copied on whatever communication goes out, just so I'm able to either to share it or to refer to it when talking to people.
Great. Yeah, I'll for sure make sure that you are included on anything that's going out, and give you a little bit more information on what that strategy is for reaching everyone. It's interesting that you mentioned children, because that's something that James and I talked about when he was in town a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke to the value of that too, in terms of the importance of having children involved. And
You have a pretty good representation on the Youth Advisory Council this year of kids from across, the city. And so, and I bet you that group that's under our umbrella, they could give a lot of good advice as to where to reach out to make an impact with students too.
That's a great idea. Yeah. And he shared that same thought, that just having the kids involved and even just in the room changes the tone of the conversation, because it really does get us thinking more about the future, longer term, and really people start to think more about what's really important to them when they think about when the kids are involved, community as compared to where the curb is, it becomes a different conversation, and it's more focused on the heart of the matter. Yeah, when kids are part of it.
Thank you.
I have one question. So you talked about moving the curb. I understand the euphemism effectively. What I'm curious about that is how that plays into kind of the regional transportation framework. How are we interacting with regional stakeholders in that regard?
Yeah, that's a great question, of course, because we do share the roadways with Washington County and ODOT, depending on which part of the corridor we're looking at. We have some ideas, that we've shared with them kind of at a high level and have been kicking around. We've been wanting to not get ahead of it, in terms of we want to make sure that the vision starts with listening to the community, and then the plan becomes an outcome of that. So we didn't want to run too far ahead with specific ideas on the transportation side, such that it would feel like a project that's already been developed. But we have been in communication with ODOT and with Washington County to share some ideas. And I'd say that we've got a really good, discussion going with them. And I think they share a lot of the goals that we have for the area. one of the things that is exciting on that front is that recently ODOT adopted the Blueprint for Urban Design document, which is very relevant to Hillsborough because it really gives a lot more flexibility for design of state highways through urban areas, which is what we have, of course, on 10th. And it unlocks a lot of the tools that were highlighted in the presentation for how to balance the needs of mobility, vehicle mobility, with land use, the adjacent land use. So basically, it's more open to exploring these kinds of ideas for creating a streetscape that's pedestrian friendly through urban areas. So I think we've got some really great partners there with both agencies, and we're eager to collaborate with them as these ideas start to develop. But at this point, we haven't gone too far with any specific concept that would be vetted by either of them.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. And it's great to hear that ODOT is finally letting up on some of those requirements. That was very much a square peg, round hole situation for us. And I really appreciate the focus on community engagement and the focus on equity. So making sure that everyone's at the table, but really, really trying to make sure folks who live around there are at the table and feel able to make that change. I really appreciate that. You touched on a little bit my other question, which is zoning. Is looking at zoning part of what we intend to do here? Like that's one of the things that's kind of an interesting concept here. Additionally, in regards to gentrification, being mindful of any of our investments unduly impacting the folks who already live there. Kind of how are those two things being taken into account in the visioning process?
Yeah, I can speak to that, but a little bit. Dan, I saw you pop up there. Did you want to take a first?
There was one piece
response?
but go ahead, Justin. Yeah, I got a response to Councilor Martin's, at least the first part of the question, but I think you've got the rest. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll start with the second. I mean, so when it comes to displacement and gentrification, that's avoiding that is one of the cornerstone principles of going into this work. So what the tools would be to avoid that, we kind of want to co-create that as we go through this process. But certainly I think that's going to be a key component of whatever the outcomes are, is having a more refined strategy for, at the one hand, giving a little boost to the economic vitality of the street, but on the other, balancing that with initiatives to avoid displacement and gentrification. So it could be, like I mentioned, that's maybe city-owned commercial space. It could be community investment and the city sort of convening that. It could be, and Dan can speak to this a little bit more, and I think you probably will here in just a second. It could be looking at zoning. It could be looking at forming a new district. But at this point, we're not proposing any of those specifics, but I think they're on the table.
Yeah, it's really I want to emphasize the last point that Justin just made there, which is our staff, and we talked all throughout tonight's presentation. We've heard all throughout the community engagement, at least thus far, and we're in the very early stages. This is a multifaceted effort and a very complex one in terms of both the impacts and the needs, both positive and negative impacts. But our staff is already getting a jump start on some of the transportation analysis and technical analysis there. We are also starting to pull together best practice and best examples for anti-displacement to both the residential and commercial sides, to what Justin was talking about. But we're going to hold a little bit of that preliminary research back because we want to allow the community vision to take shape and then bring additional concepts and solutions to bear based on what the vision is, not have those solutions constrain or artificially inform the direction that this goes. And the same holds true with zoning. Zoning in our downtown, back to the framework plan document, has been established out here for some time. We want to hear what the community envisions, not be necessarily operating under the current zoning or not. Take the vision and then come back and have staff translate that vision into, does things like zoning or road cross sections or economic development incentives and programs align with that or not? And then that's where we have to get back to work and bring more specificity to what then the detailed proposal that comes back forward, and then also back to feasibility for realizing then that vision as well. Now, those will be continuing to occur iteratively, but you'll see a lot more of that towards the Taylor end. And that umbrella slide Justin showed, that's why those two boxes are still so much hatched out, is we're doing work there, but a lot of that vision has to inform that work as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that vision focused solution right here.
Any other questions or comments?
I think we need to have Councilor Martin learn some Carlos Santana for Councilor Alcare, because I agree that those photos are amazing, or those artist renditions are amazing. Would love to see that as well. So I know we're talking about the bigger picture and all that, but yes, thank you so much for your work here, Justin and team.
Thank you.
I will just say it is time. I can argue that it's, that it's past time, but I'm really pleased and proud that this is happening. It is one of the most important entrances, to our community. But more than that, it is the heart and soul of our Latino community, and to give them a place, that feels more like home, where the community is a higher priority than getting cars through on a highway. I just think that shows a degree of respect. It offers a degree of dignity that they haven't had in that neighborhood for many years. And so I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased for this. I think it goes, hand in hand with the improvements to the, to the Walnut Street Park, goes hand in hand, in the improvements really to Chute Park, where, it was almost literally a brand new library from the shell, taking it back to the shell. Bottom line, it's just a next logical, timely step, and I'm really, really excited for this work. And I'm really grateful for the outreach that's taking place. I appreciate Councilor Relato's comments about the compressed timeline, because, I don't want people to feel like we're in a hurry to get through it. I want to make sure that we have a chance for people to be aware of it, because sometimes great thought, great feedbacks take some time to percolate. And so I think that stretching things out, is not a disadvantage. And when I say stretching it out, I don't mean stringing it along, but just making sure we take the time to really do it well and to do it right. So thank you.
So Justin, I'm really counting on you, because by the time that is going to be put together, I'll be retired and able to go ahead and hang out in the park that you showed us. So it would be great to get ongoing updates of how things are going. And I want to echo what people have said about outreach. And I think that you're going to need to be prepared that you might pop up at a supermarket and people might think you're the cops. So I think it's all about what's a pop-up and what are people going to expect. And I would strongly encourage you to work with Bienestar, Centro, Prosperidad, Adelante, and the Chamber, to make sure that we're doing as much outreach as possible. And hey, maybe we can even reach out to the county to help with some outreach in Hillsborough over this. I think that it would be important to get as much participation of local governments that these people have been engaging with. I think it would be important. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we definitely are starting, and more than starting, we're pretty well along in building that framework with the team that you just mentioned, in terms of Centro, Adelante, Bienestar. They are really close with the team in terms of the strategy for getting this the word out. And so I think we're on the right track there, but we gotta stick to it.
All right. Any questions for Raheem, Dan, or Robbie as part of this? And seeing none, then Robbie, I'll turn it over to you for the last word.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, just a word of thanks to Justin, Dan, and Raheem, and everybody else. There's been a lot of staff involved through all of this planning to this point, and there's immense work ahead, and it's exciting. So thanks for the enthusiasm and the support tonight. We're looking forward to connecting more and more with that area of our town, with that community. It's an exciting project, and so lots of fun things to come. So thanks again.